Tottenham Hotspur are looking to avenge last season's North London derby home defeat as bitter rivals Arsenal come to town on Sunday. And I'm joined by SunSport's tactical guru, Dean Scoggins, back in the Tactics Exposed studio once again. And Dino has got 5 things that fans should be looking out for ahead of Sunday's game, including a secret tactic used by Unai Emery that Tottenham should be employing to stop Bukayo Saka. Dino, great to have you back. Give us your 5 things then we're looking out for.
Yeah, we're struggling to keep it to 5 because there are hundreds that we could look at here. But the Saka one first. It's the invisible defender that we can be looking at, or the Saka hijacker, they've been calling it, to try and stop him. And then we've got Arteta has got a couple of options to solve that huge Declan Rice problem. You know, but against Spurs, that could work even without Rice. We could have Sterling straight into the firing line. We've got Arsenal being the cutback kings. It's like an old-fashioned tactic that's come back in vogue. And then Spurs obviously have some attacking problems that they need to address, having not been able to hit the back of the net enough against Newcastle.
You've got a vested interest here, big Tottenham fan. You've got to be scared about Bukayo Saka. Any team coming up against Arsenal would be silly not to think and worry about the England
Not
star
just scared,
man.
petrified.
Well, there we go, yeah. But the Saka hijacker, that is an absolutely wonderful turn of phrase. Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, so basically what it means is that there's a way of a second defender stopping Saka. But before we get to that, we have to look at how Arteta wants Saka to receive the ball. So Arteta hates Saka coming towards the ball, going back towards Ben White in the right-back position with a defender up his bum, as he calls it, because Saka can only really go in one direction or he gets hit by that defender. We know Saka gets kicked a lot and he takes a lot of punishment. So what he wants is Saka to start on the wing and make his run inside the fullback, where then Ben White passes the ball into his path and he's taking the ball on the run. We see him do it all the time. He did it for England this week.'s done it for Arsenal for years. It's fabulous. So what Unai Emery did is set up a second defender behind the left back. Now, that's a little bit easier to do against Arsenal because they don't play with that out-and-out number 9. Kai Havertz's been playing up front, drifts in between the lines, but he's not the Erling Haaland or the Harry Kane who plays in that number 9 position. So the second centre-back basically hides behind the left-back. 1v1 behind the left-back. So that when Saka takes that touch infield, which beats the left-back, then the centre-back comes through to intercept Saka or the ball and basically be a block behind that. And that's got a second advantage as well. It means the left-back doesn't come infield. He stays with Ben White, who might be on that overlap run. So Aston Villa did it brilliantly. Arsenal attack massively down the right. They're most dangerous down the right-hand side. They're really lopsided,
they rarely
actually.
Go down the left,
they don't really. They play inside left with Rice, which we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, they're really, really reliant on their right side. And for about 55 minutes to an hour, Aston Villa had it nailed. But there was a couple of lapses in concentration. Saka's superb. He gets in.
So how is that not just doubling up? Not to oversimplify this, but it sounds a little bit like if the other centre-back's coming over, A, is that not just doubling up? B, do they not leave quite a large gap in the middle for Arsenal's other good players?
Yeah, a little bit so, but the doubling up difference is that the invisibility thing. Emery doesn't want the defender to be visible. So if Saka looks over his shoulder before he receives the ball, which he will, because he's a top-class player, then he will look and he'll see the fullback, but he won't see the centre-back, who is almost blind side of him, and then the centre-back comes through and intercepts. It's not easy, don't get me wrong, but it's
like
a fabulous
ghost
tactic.
Defender almost.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And as far as not leaving them outnumbered elsewhere, basically because they don't play a number 9, then the other centre-back can pick up the forward. So it's not as big a deal to double up. And also, most teams have to double up on Saka because he's just that dangerous and that brilliant. So if he gets to the edge of the box, you've got a problem. But if you can keep him up there and push him back inside towards the midfielders, then it's much better.
But if you're Saka, does he not beat the first man like he's so good at? And then as the second one comes to engage, he just lays it off to Odegaard on the edge of the box or another one of Arsenal's impressive attacking midfield players. and then there's a big overload
Absolutely,
there.
but that's where the left-back tracking Ben White's run is key as well.
But in the middle, I mean.
In the middle, it will be very congested. Right. Very, very congested. So you've got to think that what we don't want is Saka running at an angle that is going towards the goal. Yep. We know what he's going to do. He's going to cut in and bend it for the far corner. Last North London derby at the Emirates, hits Christian Romero, goes in for the goal. But if he's going back into midfield and playing it sideways, that's a win.
Who's going to be Tottenham's invisible man then behind the left back?
Possibly Mickey van der Ven, hoping that he's fit from a Tottenham perspective, and also he's quick enough to turn back and go the other way. And if it's not, then that'll be Romero. And Romero's had some defensive problems in the last few weeks, which we'll get to in a minute.
Right, Dino, Mikel Arteta is going to be without Declan Rice after that petulant red card he got against Brighton for nudging the ball out of players.
All Spurs fans celebrating.
Well, I bet they did. Yeah. As Joel Veltman tried to take a free kick. Silly second yellow card, but it does mean for arguably the biggest game of the season, certainly it's for Tottenham fans. Arsenal fans will tell you that it's not, but we all know that it is. They're missing their best player now. How do you solve that conundrum and replace, if you're Mikel Arteta, one of your best players?
Well, there's a few things that are huge that they will miss, really, really will miss. But there's a few things that actually, I think, against Tottenham, it's not the end of the world for Arsenal to lose Declan Rice. And there are some things that you can replace and there are things that you can't replace, obviously. Set pieces is a big thing, OK? It's a big thing in the North London derby. We saw Spurs concede the most in the league, or the most in the top six, last year. And Arsenal scored the most set pieces in the division last year. Part of that was Declan Rice taking those in-swingers from the left-hand side. And Kai Havertz scored a header in the North London derby at the Tottenham Stadium last year. It hurt quite badly because we could see it coming from a mile away, and it still happened. But Arsenal are going to miss that. They're going to miss his set pieces. They've still got Saka to take the in-swingers from the other side, but perhaps Trossard, perhaps Martinelli, perhaps Jorginho will take those in-swingers from the other side. But, they've used Rice really well. The other thing, obviously, look, we can sort of gloss over Rice's defensive capabilities. Everybody knows he's sensational in that position. He will cover so much ground. He'll cover his fullbacks. He'll stand in front of the centre-halves and block. So, look, we know that. But the thing that has been so important to Arsenal, we talked about being slightly lopsided and attacking down the right, but Declan Rice drives the ball forward. He drives the play forward. He doesn't necessarily play it with the ball with 1-2s, play it wide. He picks it up, sees that the midfield is congested, and he bursts through that gap to carry the game up the field and push the game right up the field. Did it for England in the Nations League games, and he's been doing it for Arsenal so successfully where Arteta has changed his position. So, what do they do without him? Kai Havertz is a comfortable swap where he could go and play in a position he's played for Germany quite a lot.
Now, people are going to be furrowing their brow at that, going, what are you talking about? Declan Rice is a defensive midfielder. I know he's got that Frank Lampard complex where he likes to think he's an old-school box-to-box player. But Kai Havertz, you've barely only just about convinced people that he's a striker. Now you're putting him in centre midfield. What on earth is all that about?
Well, if you go back to one of our previous tactics videos, we explained on how how we saw how Arteta's changed Havertz into such an important cog in his machine playing up front. However, Rice isn't just a defensive midfielder anymore. He's changed his position. He's not just that six anymore. He's been in the penalty area as much as any other Arsenal player this season. He's been creating goals, getting himself in goal-scoring positions. And it is that drive. What Arteta wants is the game played up on the edge, if not beyond the edge of the other team's penalty area.
Really pin
a team in. And what Rice does is when you're in a difficult position, he drives the game forward. So against Spurs, if he was playing, you'd be looking to him to break Tottenham's high line with a run. OK, so he's not playing. So if Kai Havertz does play there, we'll be looking for that inside-out pass over the top of Tottenham's ridiculously high line, which last season in the North London derby, Havertz played Saka in over the top there, and that is what they'll be looking for this time. So perhaps, it's a difficult decision, but perhaps they sacrifice Havertz from what has been that number 9 position, or false 9, where he plays 1-2s with Saka and plays with the other left winger, gets on the end of crosses. He drifts into a deeper position where Rice may have been and plays those diagonal balls into that massive space behind.
So you think that ability is more important to Mikel Arteta, the ability to have the player in that position, driving forward with the ball, like you mentioned, and also playing those quick balls over the top. So you think it's actually more important, because fans might be looking at that going, oh, that'll be a straight swap for Jorginho, a more traditionally defensive-minded or at least a central midfield player. You're flipping that on its head almost and going, no, the defensive stuff will look after itself. And actually, it's the attacking attributes, despite the fact that the base position is quite deep. That's what's going to matter the most to Arteta?
That is against Tottenham, and that's why it's a big decision. The sort of easy, on paper, champ manager decision is you just put Jorginho back in there.
06.
Absolutely. If you just put Jorginho as a straight swap, you then don't have to move Havertz. That is obviously an option. Jorginho didn't have a great time in the North London derby. At the Emirates last year, he got robbed for the second goal. And when he's been played against Spurs, they've seen him as the player they can get at and really press hard. But that is an option. Leave Havertz up front. But as I say, because I see Tottenham as having majority of the ball here in this game, I would hazard a guess they'll be in 60-65% possession territory at home.
That'll surprise a lot of people.
It will, but Tottenham retain the ball. And also they play a very high line. So Havertz is not going to be in that position where the edge of the box playing those 1-2s against Tottenham as he would be against other teams who play against a low block.
Is he defensively disciplined enough for that not to be a problem?
I think he's vastly underrated. He's just a fabulous football player, and he's also very, very well trusted by Arteta. So Arteta's decision really is trust him to play up front and still be the link man who can drop in, Harry Kane style, and play his wingers over the top, or start him in the Declan Rice position and tell him he's also got that responsibility on the ball to drive with the ball through the spaces and play those balls over the top.
Fair enough. Look, any of Dino's Arsenal friends watching this, you can clip that up. Kai Havertz is a fantastic player, was the exact quote, I think. Look, Raheem Sterling, the latest victim of the absolute circus, chaos, shambles, whatever adjective you want to use, at Chelsea, moves to the top of London from West on loan. And you reckon throwing him straight into the firing line may be the answer?
I really do. It was an intriguing transfer, absolutely intriguing transfer. I don't really understand why Chelsea allowed him to go. You know, let's buy 25 wingers and ignore the bloke who's got England caps and
who
loads
we're
of
paying
experience.
a severe amount of money.
Absolutely, and again, another proven, experienced Premier League player. But anyway, Arsenal's gain. After Chelsea let him go. And at first, I thought it's an odd one. But against Tottenham, I'm a bit worried with my Tottenham hat on there for a second. But from an Arsenal perspective, he really could be the difference with that high line. Again, I'm going to talk about Romero in a second because it's bugging me. But Sterling has got that ability, like Saka, to take the ball on the run and to push the ball into those spaces. His pace, will be something that is really key. Again, high line against Tottenham. And, he's got experience in these big games. You don't have to worry about him going in and think, has he played enough?
Is he?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not daunted by going there, absolutely.
So how exactly then does Arteta use him? Is it the false nine, which you seem to be suggesting if Havertz is back, or does he play on the left wing, which he's played at, in his career before, but arguably his stronger position? Arsenal, not weak there as such, but certainly not as strong as they are on the other flank with Bukayo Saka. Exactly how do you see Arteta using him in this game, but then perhaps a little bit more longer term?
Yeah, I think the other thing we should point out here as well is that Arteta's had a week, 10 days with Sterling on the training ground whilst we've had an international break.
Plus all the time he spent with him at Man City.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a position where he'd have decided, Arteta, what he wants to do this week, and he would have been working on it for days. So, he's leaving nothing to chance. But yeah, they've got two options. So if he decides he wants to leave Havertz as the attacker, then obviously you bring Jorginho into that midfield position and Sterling could play off the left. He could decide, I'm going to play Jorginho and Partey as a base and then play Havertz up and Sterling off the left. Or he could switch that round and say Havertz can play as a 10 and Sterling could play up with Trossard or Martinelli. So there are plenty of options there to move around. But the key for me is that Sterling will be adaptable. And when he plays against Pedro Porro at Tottenham, Porro spends less time in Tottenham's half than he does in the opponent's penalty area. So, more shots than any other defender in the league this year. Yeah. And he just goes forwards. And so you know, he
a big
leaves
disciple
Romero.
of Ange ball.
Oh,
isn't
absolutely.
it,
And look, it's great fun to watch, and it's going to be fun on Sunday. There's no way that Ange is going to change his method against Arsenal.
May not be as fun, though, if you're looking as Pedro Porro's frantically chasing Raheem Sterling back down the pitch 30 yards behind him.
Yeah, there will be a bit of that. That's going to happen in the game. And but yeah, if Pedro Porro goes forward, then the inside right midfielder for Tottenham, which could be Sarr, could be Kulusevski, could be Bentancur, they've got a big job on their hands, because what Sterling will do is he'll float in between that left wing position and the striker position.
Yeah.
So he's very difficult to pick up. If he goes too far as a centre forward, then the right centre back will pick him up. If he plays too far on the left wing, then Spurs have got enough time to get back to him before he gets into a goal scoring position. But yeah, look, I see Sterling and the space in behind as a real factor. We watched Tottenham at Newcastle last week, and again, up on the halfway line. And look, this is a tactic. This is not, they're not concentrating. The tactic is, yeah, absolutely. We're exposing them. They were exposed, you know, but basically, so when the ball is coming over the top, you'll see Tottenham's back four in a line, ready to sprint. Okay?
In that exact position.
Yeah, in that position, literally in that position. And we'll see them ready to sprint. And what happened against Newcastle was Christian Romero was watching play, and he was flat-footed, and he wasn't in a position to run that way. And the ball goes in behind him, and he's done. And I think it was Jacob Murphy who ran through, and Isak scored. The other three Tottenham defenders are in a position to run. So Arsenal will be looking for that. So Spurs will be on the halfway line.
Yeah.
You know, the two centre-backs, whether
especially
it's
at home, there's
absolutely,
going to be no room
and they'll
for
get lots of the ball, as I said. And if Romero and Van de Ven, or it could be Romero and Dragozin, are the defenders, they'll be on the halfway line, and then one of the two fullbacks for Tottenham is going to have to be disciplined and stay. We might see Destiny Udogie play possibly as defensive as he's ever played, because there's the Saka issue, and also they will be worried about that ball into out over the top. That's Ange giving a little bit, maybe. You know, won't change his methods for anyone, mate. Yeah. Maybe a little bit this time. But yeah, the space in behind. I think he can do
a better Australian accent than that.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to try that.
It's it's that game away at Man City for Tottenham will stick in everyone's mind, won't it? And I think that was almost the catalyst for Postecoglou to say, look, this is me. If it worked away at Man City, it's going to work anywhere. And it feels like the very last place he's going to go.
Yeah, and they nearly pulled it off with 9 men against Chelsea as well. Exactly. So he's not going to change the line.
Certainly not home to Arsenal.
No, but what I would say is that the tactic of being the high line and making it a race against the other team is enable Tottenham to play right up high in the opponent's half. And the reason it didn't work against Newcastle was because Romero switched off. Yeah. It wasn't because the tactic was wrong. It was because the player stopped concentrating. And Ange will look at it and go, listen, if you were in the right position and you were facing the right direction, you would have, you would have won that race against Jacob Murphy. And then Spurs would have been looking at it going, well, Spurs are going to win it here instead of losing the game. So they will do it again. They'll do it again. And it's a case of, can they concentrate?
That seems fairly basic management, doesn't it? Face the right direction and be ready to run. Look, Tottenham fans watching this will be a little bit worried so far, because it's been a lot about Arsenal's attacking abilities and how Tottenham are going to contain them. We've got one more point on that before we actually talk about Tottenham going forward. Arsenal, you said, are the cutback kings. A little bit of a hark back to the olden days. Perhaps you've talked about Sterling, we've talked about Saka, we've talked about Havertz and who it may be up front. Regardless of the personnel, the tactic will be the same. Talk us through it.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, both teams are cutback kings, just in very different ways. You know, just quickly on Spurs, they will play inside the fullbacks to try and create the space where their own fullbacks go up inside the fullbacks, or get the wingers the space outside so the ball comes flashing across the face. That's how they'll play. Can they get Solanke in the game? Can they get a striker in the box, which they didn't do against Newcastle, in order to put one of those
defenders
away?
On the halfway line, but no centre forward in the box.
It was infuriating, and hopefully from my point of view, they solved that this week. But Arsenal's is very different. We talked earlier about Declan Rice driving the game forward, right, and the need for Havertz to do that instead of Rice this time. But what Arsenal make you do, which is so difficult to stop, is that once they've pushed you to the edge of your own area, they then push you inside your own area. And you'll see it time and time again. You'll see Spurs on Sunday be defending inside their own box, almost on the penalty spot, where the back four is. So you've got your back four in there, you've got your midfielders in front, and then what Arsenal will do is cut the ball back into the space, sort of a rectangle space on the edge of the D, and then the shot comes in. And then, of course, you're going to get deflections, the goal is unsighted. They're sort of bringing back the old-fashioned cut back and smack, which was used to be trained on all the parks all around the country.
So when you say cut back, are you talking Bukayo Saka doing the old Iron Robin, which he does so well and seems, you know what he's going to do, cut back inside on his left? Or do you mean cut back with the ball passing back to those players?
Well, both. Because if Saka cuts back onside on his left foot, as a defender, you've got to block the shot.
Yeah.
You've got to get out to him and block the shot. And if a defender does his job correctly, then what happens is Saka's got a man just to his left who he can lay the ball off to.
Drawn him in.
And then he can. And it was actually, it wasn't an Ange Tottenham team, but it was the North London derby before last at the Emirates where Thomas Partey scored a sweet shot from the edge of the box into the corner. And Arteta this season is doing that even more than he's done before. And he's getting the full-backs in behind, and he's pushing teams back. So we're going to get very complex here, right? So Arsenal...
Buckle up.
Yeah, Premier League teams before, and a lot this season and last season, are playing a 3-box-3 formation. Right. So 3 defenders, a box of 4 players in midfield, and 3 attackers, okay? And to make that box in midfield, most teams are using a fullback, be it a right back or a left back.
The in vogue inverted fullback.
Exactly,
the Trent
the trendy fullback that apparently Pep invented, and everybody else is copying him. But yeah, you know, enough about Gary Neville. But the box in midfield means that you swamp midfield from a defensive point of view. It helps you in transition. So if you lose the ball, you're not going the other way, and it gets your ball players at the head of that being on the ball as much as possible, and you've still got 3 up. Arsenal do it slightly differently. They play with 4 at the back still, and then a box in midfield, which includes Odegaard and Havertz as the most forward players, the top corners, and then the wingers go on from there. That means that the fullbacks can get much more involved. That's why we see Ben White overlapping. That's why we've seen Zinchenko in the first few weeks of the season really involved in play high up the field. And whether it's Timber or Zinchenko in the North London derby on Sunday, they've got that option. So, yeah, it gets to that position where you push the game right up the field, and then all of a sudden you think, well, Rice has gone past the ball when he plays. Yeah. You've got Havertz in a forward position. You've got Trossard or Martinelli right up. You've got Saka right up. So the defence gets squeezed right back, all gets cut back to the edge of the box, and someone's running onto it to smack it in. So Tottenham are going to have to be very aware of that. Basuma plays very deep and sits almost in between the centre-backs. So Maddison, whether it's Sarr, Kulusevski or Bentancur in the other position, have got to be aware. And it might even be that a striker or a winger for Tottenham has to drop back and get into that position. But old-fashioned cutbacks.
Yeah, they're going to find it very difficult, aren't they, Tottenham, to have all of their players on the halfway line and all of their players on their own 6-yard box. Right, Dino, talk to me a little bit about the small chance, it appears, that Tottenham might actually be able to attack Arsenal at their home ground with Ange Ball, but attacking issues you're worried about for Sunday.
Yeah, don't worry about Tottenham attacking. They will attack. There's going to be, there's no question that they will have loads of the ball, and they'll pin Arsenal back a lot of the time, hence the ball over the top on the counter attack. But my issue with them is that the defenders have too much of the ball. And so, Tottenham defenders have far too much of the ball. And you squeeze the play right up, and you've got, hopefully Solanke's ready to come back in, and you've got, be it Brennan Johnson, Solanke and Son as the front 3 perhaps, or Kulusevski instead of Johnson. They're right up high. We've seen the fullbacks, they go into sort of inverted 10 position, never mind an inverted midfield position. You've got the fullbacks going next to the strikers. You've then got midfield player behind. And what it means is the defence just packs that area. And it means that Van der Ven and Romero, or, might be Dragozin instead of Van der Ven if he's not fit this week, and Porro and Udogie in defensive areas, and then Maddison, who comes back and gets the ball in a very deep position a lot, they end up with just too much of the ball. We've seen that Romero's had more touches than any other Tottenham player this season. And you've played Leicester, battered them and drawn. You've played Newcastle, battered them and lost. And then obviously Everton at home, and Romero is the one who's had the most touches. Now, that's a problem for Spurs. Mickey van der Ven played 2 of those games and had 180 touches in 2 games.
What's the answer then? How do they solve it?
The answer is that they've got to find space between the lines and to get those other ball players on the ball earlier. What I think Tottenham have been doing badly at the moment is that they're overplaying. It's one touch too many, which then means your Son on the left wing, or when he played as a forward, or your Johnson on the right wing, was doing what I said about Saka when it doesn't go right, where you go back towards your own goal, and then the safe ball is just to play it back to the centre-backs again, so the centre-back gets another touch. Look, they don't mind
almost
having
resetting,
absolutely.
They're
resetting
too
often.
Going forward.
They're resetting too often. And look, it's fine to a degree because Spurs' centre-backs are such good footballers. You know, they're both brilliant on the ball. You know, Romero scores goals. I'd rather Romero on the ball than off the ball at the moment, especially in a North London derby. And look, they will have loads of possession. And Mickey van der Ven, if available, will burst into those inside left channels and run forward with the ball and try and break those lines. But, you know, we'll see Arsenal with a very, very disciplined back 4, as they did in Man City away last season. And, you know, whether they play Jorginho and Partey as a 2 there, or whether Havertz come back in and it's still a 3, you'll see them lined up and they will just squash the space in between the defence and attack. And Spurs have got to get their football players, the top football players, Maddison, Son, Solanke, Kulusevski, on the ball in difficult positions, not just have Romero standing there with his foot on the ball looking for someone to move around in front of him. Yeah. And look, it's going to be a great game. Right, it's going to be a fantastic game for the neutral.
Yeah, and
I'll have no fingernails left. Let's just hope that it's attacked both ends and we see plenty of goals at one end.